kind of a very special thing. Analog doesn't usually host. Give it up for Analog and your baristas, Sullivan and Nat. Very nice of them to be here working when they probably shouldn't after hours. It's very fucking dope. I have liner notes. Has everyone been to the uninitiated? What is unpoetry? I'll move to the actual stage, I guess. This isn't the stage. I just started over here. What's up, Timothy? So what? I guess we're in front of the door. Sweet. That works out. Unpoetry, what is it? A monthly performance series. Sometimes it's a dude scraping fridge parts against other fridge parts with distortion. Sometimes it's dancers. Sometimes it's just poets and writers like it is today. This is our third year. This is Unpoetry's third year in existence. And that's pretty cool. We have floated. Yeah, thank you. I'm walking around here like Cocktail Dad. This thing is empty, kid. This thing is empty. But yeah, this is the first time we've been in this space. Not necessarily the first time I've been on the Hill, but I've been lucky to kind of inhabit and roll through Seattle as people let me through. What is it? Upcoming events. In May on the 15th, we'll be at the Fry Art Museum. Sullivan will be performing at that one with Quentin Baker and Blues Weave and Cheyenne Steele. That should be cool. At the end of the month, what do we have? There's a bunch of flyers over here. I can't remember now off the top of my head. I've been writing things down all day and making flyers all day, and I can't remember any of it. But I'm really excited to be here in terms of, I wrote down notes. That's what I'm reading here. But I guess Unpoetry, for the uninitiated, for the first time here, has always been really about challenging what a poetry reading can or cannot be, right? And who actually gets to define that space, right? Is it defined by the audience's expectations? Is it defined by the artist's expectations? And really, like, once you break it all down, do we expect poetry to be in this space? Do we expect it to be in some sort of exalted hall? Is it weird that there's no beer? Is it weird? You know what I mean? What do we want from this? There's so many poetry readings all the time, and there's so many events, and we usually default to what we've seen before, who we've seen before, and where we've been at before. And my whole trip has always been to just disrupt that, right? To give space to the people who do not have that space, which includes me. It started out by just giving myself space, and then it slowly kind of morphed into giving so many people, you know, it's morphed into this community building thing, which I didn't really mean it to be, right? And I don't know, I think that's kind of valuable, and it's where I give my time. And poetry is definitely finite. How many do I have in the tank? I don't know. But that's probably my fault. Sometimes I'm doing 4 or 5 a month, and I told myself I wouldn't do that, and look where the fuck we are. Ooh, nice. I can say fuck. It's a Fry. I gotta keep it to a real no fucks at all. I drop one fuck just to make sure they know who the fuck they're dealing with. You know? But that's all right. And then I just want to kind of talk about, like, just because I need to talk about it in a way because of like what this space is, and just to kind of color the reading in a way that I think is socially responsible. We're supposed to have the reading somewhere else, and that didn't work out, and that was just mainly because of language I thought was, I don't know, inappropriate, racially coded. We were told that the reading had to be inclusive, and that it was supposed to not be political or too personal. I tend to kind of take that to mean inclusive for white people who think a certain specific thing. And I'm only mentioning it now here not to cause drama or spread bullshit, but it's just socially irresponsible for me not to say, like, when I talk about inclusivity, I don't always mention it, but it's definitely defined by, you know, BIPOC and queer bodies, you know, me, myself, Mexican American, right? Where do I fit in this city, and where do we all fit in? So it's really important, I think, especially now in the next 4 years, right, when the definition of American is being very much questioned and challenged in a very official way, that, I don't know, I just never talk about this shit, right? So I'm starting off a little heavy, and maybe I'm like slanting everything a little too much. But I just felt it was necessary to kind of bring this idea up, right? And also, like, Analog stepped in, our community stepped in, was like, what space you got, right? Like, everybody was real supportive, and that's kind of the whole purpose of all of this, right? We band together. They can't get all of us. And together we're strong, and that's the whole fucking point of it. So thanks for being here. Ooh, nice. A nailed that. Nice. There you go. A little laugh. Okay, let's actually fucking start. You want to start with poems? Ebo, you want to start us off?
Sure.
All right, everybody. Ebo Barton.
Inspired by a little-known artist, but you should totally check her out. Her name is Beyonce. I hear she's on some channels. But she had an album called Lemonade, and it was the song called Freedom Cut Me Loose. And I thought that was just such an interesting idea. When I came out to my mother, her first reaction was to comment on the volume of my voice when I said transgender, as if being myself in public wasn't already loud. I lowered my voice. Do you reach adulthood when your parents' reactions to your unblossoming start to sound hollow like an empty cage? When you look into a mirror and discover you are the only and ugliest salvation your family ever inherited? Do you reach full-grown adulthood when your reflection rejects you in your second language? The language you kept safe in your back pocket is an exhausted compass that only points towards the ocean. What about respect for my elders means mute myself? Are you still an adult if you just want to go home? I learned that being free isn't what everyone wants, especially if you find custody convenient. And I know that you think my gender makes you angry that your Jesus did not die for this, but the truth is, my gender binds you to fear, uncovers your discomfort from seeing the rapture of my reach, these bare wrists. What about my freedom scares you? I named myself Ebo to worship the slave rebellion that drowned their captors, rose into the sky, turned into birds, and flew back home. Why would you deny me this worship? Why would you keep this story trapped in a book? And don't mistake me for fearless. It's taken me a whole lifetime to get back home, but I'm still willing to come back for you if you want to come. Jaden Smith's skirt, Billy Porter's entire wardrobe, Lizzo's exposed thong, Monroe Bergdorf's middle finger, Zaya Wade, Harriet Tubman, my beard, my pronouns, my lips blossoming on a shoulder blade. We are the efflorescence of eternal emancipation. Come with us. Before I leave, tell my mother I've uninstalled the whisper in my authentic. And if you don't want to untie the knots of shame, trying to convince you compromises the wind, cradling my wings, so stay in bliss. But ask yourself, are you free? Are you conditioned to this captivity? Whatever the answer is, please let me live. I just want to go home. Thank you. Another thing that it's so weird to perform in front of a door, so I'm going to keep watching.
It freaks you out. We're literally supposed to be over there if you want to migrate.
Yeah, like I'm from LA, like kind of.
Yeah, no. Make yourself.
Open door behind me. Okay, so something that was talked about was silence and what silence can teach us, and how do you, as a spoken word poet, like how the hell do I talk about silence? So this is what I got for y'all. It has been 14 years since I've seen you. Could not point you out in a crowd of 3. You left me twice. The first when I was 2, and the second when I was 14. It was as though you could not leave me enough. As though my infant brain could not remember the sudden absence of your screaming voice climbing the walls of all my future relationships. As though it was my fault. I've heard that you and I share features like a dinner I've been force-fed for as long as I can remember, but you won't even sit at the table with me. My memories of you include when I cut my foot at 3 years old and got 12 stitches. You said, I wrote my first poem at 6, a personification of a street sign I remembered how to spell. You reacted to it like, I got my heart broken for the first time when I was 14. A girl who could not understand my obsession with wanting to spend every lunch period together for a week. When she said we couldn't hang out anymore because I was weird, I went home to cry to the day you left. The last words you said to me were, give these keys to your mother. And I said, and I've responded to you like this ever since. Are you proud? I learned something from you. Will you tell my ex-wife that I stayed 5 years too long? I was learning how to stay and not be my father's. Will you tell my friends that I don't know how to tell them how I'm feeling because Dear absent father, missing dad, the silence screaming in the gaping holes of my emotional inabilities. This is an obligatory letter to my biology that I will leave at the roots of a tree I can't even identify. What is the purpose of explaining who I am to you if you don't even recognize the miracle I've always been? I am. It feels like you should know this about me. Dear Dad, is it because I'm two that you did not want me, but I still exist? I am so painfully permanent, but I am such a miracle. Thank you. I may have two more, but I'm going to say one more for now, just in case.
You can do two. There's time.
Okay, I can do two. Oh, yeah, I can do two.
Oh, there you go.
Well, speaking of the word fuck, there's a lot of that in this one. that's the intro I got for you. I've been in and out of the Pacific Ocean, across this wretchedly beautiful fuckery of borders we call a country. I've been to love, but never through it. I've been through 2 puberties, y'all. It's fucking hot. A library wall filled with unfinished books on heartbreak, about 13 breakdowns and only 2 breakthroughs, and I've driven what feels like 1 million more internet Zoom miles from out of the weather of raining expectations and unpredictions to this gallery of skeletons to tell all of you, make a fucking mistake. I watched a Facebook video wherein the bass drum of an orchestra hit his note with so much passion, the drum mallet flew from his hands and hit the triangle player square in the face. The song never missed a note. But I imagine, in another dimension, that woman yelled, "Fuck!" so loudly that it bounced off the walls of the amphitheater and into the mouths of the pearl-necklace wealthy white women, and fuck, 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 fuck became the best remix the symphony has ever heard. My mother is not as out of her mind as I make her out to be, probably. But she had to have been to have created an offspring with the man I'm supposed to call father on purpose, and that makes me a mistake. But look at what this mistake can do. Look how many lives I've lived. Look how many people can love me. Look, I can learn and change and grow and evolve. Look at the moon. I've read somewhere that a former planet shoulder-checked a piece of our planet, and that piece got captured in the orbit and called her the moon. But I think that she had the opportunity to roam the entire universe. But she fell so in love with our faces that she committed her body to be on night watch for eternity. Tell me you can't find the beauty in mistakes. I've lost a lot of friends, life, sanity, time making mistakes, but I can only hope that I walk this life differently because of them. Next time I'll be so much better, I promise. Tomorrow, I will stand in front of a woman I've never even felt worthy of looking at. She pays all her bills on time, and she wakes up early and do Pilates or something, and she makes her mama proud, and I will say, make a mistake with me. I've lived on this broken piece of rock for 42 years, and I've literally never been right about anything. So why would I be right about you? So come with me. We'll spill our combined traumas on each other's shirts. Let's feel really uncomfortable with what we said out loud. Let's go to the wrong airport on the wrong day and still get on the plane when it's actually time, because the air is human. So let's be so human. Our flesh seems to fuck up. It'll be my fault, your bad, and our misstep, and we'll just do better next time. I'm sorry in advance for tripping on you. I'm sorry if my drumstick hits your face, but the beat is different now. Fuck, it's beautiful. Thank you. I have a phone poem now.
Oh, nice.
So, sorry. Okay. Whew, okay. Los Angelinos attempt to recover or flee from the flames, executive order. On the other side of the world, we watch a massacre in real time, executive order. ICE raids the nation and tears people away from their own lives, executive order. Beyonce wins country album of the year, executive order. Plane crash, but Taylor Swift's plane is fine and she's on her way to the Super Bowl, executive order. Elon Musk is for some reason involved in the US government and its finances, executive order. There is a military strategy known as rapid dominance. Rapid dominance uses massive force and strategic spectacle to cloud the enemy's judgment, to flood their senses with so much shock and awe their spirit is too damaged to fight back. Unsurprisingly, this strategy was developed specifically for application by the US military. If you look around, There is a stunted sea of eyes staring into the glow of the dumpster fires holding us captive. Spellbound by the flickering flames, weaving an endless ballet of destruction, our spirits are damaged. The most difficult question to answer these days is, how are you? The most difficult task is waking up. The most common feeling is uncertain. The most common phrase these days is, what the fuck? Today, I ask you to carve onto your skin, these will not be the days that end us. These are the days that will ignite us. Your voice is not terrified, it's a signal. Your heavy breaths are not distressed, they're preparing for a journey. How am I? Terrible, but I'm still fucking here. Culture is how waking up becomes an uprising. Uncertain is just an uncharted map, and what we know best is making paths where none were meant to exist. What the fuck is the anthem? Break beats over sound waves, sample it, chop it, screw it, and spit it back on repeat. Make Ariana Grande sing it so you can't get out of your head. When we ask the same question, as a riot of voices rising at once, the answer becomes impossible to ignore. We do not compose in a vacuum. We compose in collision. Each stroke, each verse, sharpening the next. We retaliate with our life stories at the open mics. We disobey with our handmade rhythms on school desks. We make maps of our escape with dirty paintbrushes. We build lifelines with movement, with bodies that refuse to fold. What we create does not disappear. It rewrites conditioning and chokes it out. Remember, culture outlives strategy. They cannot erase what cannot die. Thank you all so much.
All right, can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, okay, awesome. I'm excited to be here. So I'm a historian, and I spend a lot of my time and energy writing about other people's ancestors, and I feel morally obliged every now and then to write about my own, and especially to write critically about my ancestors and how my family story fits into this larger history of settler colonialism, white supremacy, all the bad things that East Lake Coffee probably didn't want us to acknowledge exist. So tonight I'm going to read an excerpt from an essay called The Sunshine Cure, which I published in Electric Literature last spring, but haven't had a chance to read here in Seattle yet, so I'm really excited to be able to share an excerpt from it. I was going to read new material, but I decided that vulnerability is really overrated. Sorry. I think we can all agree, yeah. So I call this essay, it's called The Sunshine Cure. I call it a reluctant personal essay, and you'll understand what that means as I read from the excerpt. But I'm reading from the end of the essay to just to set it up a little bit. This is a story about how my family moved from Chicago to Tucson, Arizona in the 1950s. And we were part of this wave of health seekers that had started moving west beginning in the mid-1800s, and they did so under the belief that sunshine, dry air, arid climates of the West could cure ailments like tuberculosis, asthma, polio. So there was this myth of the sunshine cure. And unsurprisingly, this myth did not end well for indigenous people that were occupying Western lands before all these health seekers arrived. Not only did the health seekers advance the project of transferring lands from indigenous peoples to white people, it also spread disease. So I talk about this history through the story of my Uncle Bill, who as a 9-year-old had polio and asthma and was on the verge of death in Chicago, and the doctor said, if you don't move to Tucson immediately, you're gonna die. So my family, my grandparents sent him ahead of the rest of the family. He lived there alone, slowly got better, and then the family ended up moving there after him, and that was the origins of my settler roots in Tucson. Can you still hear me in the back?
Yes.
Okay, I'll work on volume. Okay, so I'll jump in. My family wasn't wealthy, but they were educated, and they had gained some small town political clout by way of New York's notorious Tammany Hall. Irish Catholics who, in just a few generations of being in America, had leaned into their invented whiteness, stepped onto the social ladder, and climbed. They were the kinds of white or white enough immigrants Tucson wanted to attract. They were also generous, affectionate, funny, and social justice-oriented people. My grandparents were lifelong leftists who participated in Tucson's culture of radical hospitality, often welcoming passing activists and their children's friends into their crowded home for a warm meal and a place to sleep. Their guests included the famous Catholic anarchist Eamon Hennessy and their friend Dorothy Day, a literal saint. When my grandmother Eileen died in 1990, the local paper called her, quote, a pioneer in efforts to feed the hungry and shelter the homeless in Tucson. My heart swells with love and pride when I read this. We were the good whites, or at least that's what I've always wanted to believe. But the binaries of good and bad don't work so neatly when you're a settler on occupied lands, when your health, your survival, your very being exists alongside so much suffering. Before, when I thought about disease and colonization, my mind would turn to smallpox blankets, to the sexual violence that spreads venereal disease, to the livestock carrying virulent strains of illness that indigenous peoples had no acquired resistance to things that were very distant from me and my closest ancestors. I've spent the better part of the past decade researching and writing about settler colonialism, but it's only now that I've had the courage to use those same words to grapple with my own family's legacy, to look squarely at our settler entanglements and the harm they've done. It's always been too much, too tender, too many feelings to potentially hurt, too challenging to ask, what kinds of settler violence tether us to this place we call home? And harder yet to ask, what do we do about it? I still have more questions than answers, but what I do know is this. Until we all quit trying to contort ourselves out of acknowledging our complicity in the ongoing creation of the settler state, there's no real healing to be had for any of us. In grade school, the 5 C's of Arizona state history, copper, cattle, cotton, citrus, and climate, were drilled into our impressionable brains. We blithely recited those sturdy pillars of words and came to know them as the foundation of our state history. But it turns out there were other, more important C's, like colonialism, capitalism, cancer, class hierarchy, carceral states, that were never mentioned. And so many other letters we never quite got to, like B for border walls, I for insatiable growth, N for no water, V for valley fever. I could go on. Arizona was not the paradise that the titans of wellness wanted us all to believe it to be. In fact, in 1981, the year I was born, Dr. John Urban debunked the sunshine cure altogether, calling it an absolute myth. Arizona's not a climate, he said, but a philosophy. Now, late-stage Alzheimer's has turned Bill's mind soft and fluid. He sometimes remembers our names, but they're like sparks untethered from any other reality. His brain is losing its ability to fire messages to his muscles. His throat can't quite seem to swallow right. And his legs don't always know how to move his body forward. When I interviewed Bill on Zoom early in the pandemic, he was a barely there shadow of the uncle I once knew. His laugh was thin and tinny, and there was a blankness where intelligent mischief once danced in his eyes. His wife, Kathy, and his eldest sister, Betsy, were on the call to help provide some scaffolding upon which he could pin his jumbled memories. I read him passages of things he wrote to his mother as a 9-year-old separated from his family. He hardly remembered the polio, his time alone in Tucson, that tear-stained letter. He said he'd never heard of the Castle Apartments. He's close to death now, and the sadness of it chokes me into silence. As much as I've wanted to capture Bill's story, I've resisted telling my own. Over multiple rounds of revisions, friends and mentors urged me to write myself into this essay. I've refused. Who needs another white woman's navel-gazing anyway? I've complied, then erased myself again in subsequent drafts. As an academic, I've been trained to hide behind the shield of my supposed objectivity, and I've grown fond of the safety that such anonymity affords. Or maybe it's the impulse I have as a white settler to erase my existence because of all the inherent harm that it conveys. I don't have a death wish, and I'm not a proponent of suicide, so I take relative comfort in my own literary erasure instead. I don't want to be on the page, because part of me doesn't want to be here at all. But I am here, and pretending otherwise isn't going to undo the harm of my settler presence. There's no ready-made map to help me get to what I'm looking for next. A way to tabulate the debts we owe, to acknowledge and atone for our complicity. But that's not entirely true either. The pathways are there if you know to look. The Sagarete Land Trust, a Bay Area urban indigenous women-led organization, dedicates itself to the practice of rematriation, to the returning of indigenous lands to indigenous peoples. They urge lost settlers like me to, quote, consider your place in the lineage of this theft and how you might contribute to its healing, how you might reimagine your relationship to the land you are on, end quote. They offer resources, readings, conversation guides, questions for reflection, land return success stories, an invitation to contact them for more information. But what more could we want? We've already taken so much. And I don't even have to look across our own invented state lines to find answers. In Arizona, too, there are indigenous-led movements for land rematriation, seed rematriation, water rematriation. These movements emerge from deep wells of lived experience, from indigenous intellectual brilliance, from practices that predate us settlers by eons. Even just their names serve as valuable signposts, and they all point to the same core demand: give it back. So what's stopping us? I've been timid about pushing these ideas in family conversations because I'm well aware of how self-righteous, how sanctimonious I can be, how influenced I am by the zeitgeist of the very online left. It's trendy, I know, to signal land back sentiments, to offer up native land acknowledgements at the start of every gathering, to sprinkle toothless decolonizations into all we do. I don't want to give anyone the impression that I think I have all the answers. I don't. And when I talk to my family about all the bad things our whiteness has done to Native peoples and to this place we call home, it's not news to them. They feel terrible about it. It makes me sick, says my mom, and I know exactly what she means. It's a rotting feeling that I carry at the pit of my stomach too, sunk deeper by the sense of helplessness that usually comes with it. We do guilt well. But I've come to realize there's a sort of comfort in dwelling in that space too. I want us all to be dislodged from there, to be unsettled, to fight against the collective amnesia that settler memory likes to sow, and to take seriously the responsibility of repair. I worry that my family and other settlers like us will see this as a call out. It is, but it's an invitation too.
Hi! Thanks y'all for coming through. It's going to be May tomorrow. And hopefully I see some of y'all at May Day tomorrow. Cal Anderson to March for the Workers. I'm a working class writer. I do coffee to pay the bills. I write when I can. So that's kind of what I'm all about. I have 2 pieces for y'all today. And thanks for having me. This one is called Crying on the Bus. This is on the 7 in particular. All here can glimpse, stare, grimace. Me crying on the bus, nauseous, concealing hiccups, failing to. Ballooning in an enclosure within public domain, loudly scrubbing my cheeks, embarrassed snotting on my sleeves. For what? Stacked receipts, an EKG for $750, plus rushed telehealths, plus gold nuggets of sanity, unfazed by coupons. Here, gnashing and rehashing quantitatives to affect qualitatives, and maybe if I picked up extra shifts. All here can gawp, groan, ignore him. Pissing on the bus stop bench, patterned pajamas bunched at his knees, piss cascading through metal eye sockets, stirring into the indiscriminate rain. Then, shimmying his waistband over his ass and sauntering somewhere, someplace, some else. Him, hissing on the bench, ejecting a confident, loud, buoyant stream, because there's no utility in shame. Unequal, yet converging. Him pissing on the bench, me crying on the bus, folded receipts, crumpled receipts, crunched numbers, no number for the restroom, for you. We empty ourselves. They emptied us first. And everyone can purse up their lips and their eyes and their strings while on the bus, on the bench, we spin licked clean plates in a public-private partnership-sponsored tip jar spectacle, year-old pothole, sour suckling candy, potential poetry until stop requested. This one was recently published in Temporal Lobe Literary. I really like it. It's kind of like a prose poem. And just wanted to give a shout out that it is almost my 1-year wedding anniversary. And part of this was written a while ago, and then maybe almost 10 years ago, and then it was added on, the rest was added on quite recently. It's called Salting the Flesh. I have a vision of myself, raw, skinned, skinless, salted and red, on the coldest black marble on which the hottest fire is reflected. The fire being the earth, or just my life, or an apocalyptic event that I must behold. Except for my skinlessness and for the coldness of the marble and the heat of the slow explosion and the salt in my wounds, I cannot bring myself to watch. My eyes are crimson pink, bulging from their sockets, wild from crying. An inkling of a thought occurs to me and sends spasms across my body. Nerve signals, muscle contractions, and all I can do is whimper before everything is gone. I have a vision of my mother. Everything is that film blue, green, gray, and she's clutching at the bathroom sink. Pretty porcelain bride, unprepared to sacrifice her maidenhead. From then on, she became a mother. I try to have a vision of her from before then, but all I can conjure is in a faded sepia hue. Her third eye wrinkle scar, fresh and red, picking glass out of her ate's hand, sobbing, keening when Papa Audi fell from the roof. But never her whole face, not even her skinny legs under her school uniform. I have no visions of my father. That will dried out long ago. The earth so choked that the soil crackles and snaps even in the shade, snaps on perfectly neat, serrated edges, just as intended. My father, I remember, has a long lifeline splitting his palms in two. I struggle to draw a connection between his hands and the well that feels meaningful. I shouldn't. I should stop here. I have a vision of my sister. Once red, all raw, it is now green, all mold. It is her in her buttoned cardigan, statuesque, stiff, poised before a copy of Matisse's The Goldfish, hissing, our relationship is not cost beneficial. I watch her chase a dream manufactured in fluorescent white factories, cobbled together by mangled migrant fingers. She proves herself, repeatedly and exhaustingly and sickeningly exceptional. Summa cum laude. All she grasps turn to gold, only after studying through Thanksgivings and Christmases and Mom's birthdays and our family vacations, and except she and I never touched, not even while asking for your blessings, O Lord, and these thy gifts which I've never received. Would that I had someone to bear witness. Would that I had wings bat-like, translucent, veiny, and a long snake's tongue like those Manananggal I've written so much about. I would eat myself out of my mother's womb. Season the fetus with dead sea salt, drown her in shit, cry as I eat because it tastes so rotten. Regurgitate the fatty gristle, the fibrous organs. Once a sensitive bundle of nerves, now viscous and discolored in the toilet bowl. Then envision one of the many multitudes of self light years away. This one, curled in a chosen lover's arms, confessing, dumping dusty, hoarded skeletons on the floor. Bear witness, I say, breathless from undressing, skinning, salting the flesh, wincing. Eat and spit it out. But lover, oh lover, cradles each gnawed bone, suckles on their marrow and asks me to join him, reminding me a slab of poorly butchered flesh, or a quailing, grieving, yet beloved wife to eat.
I'm going to take a cue from my dear fellow readers and say vulnerability is everything. So I have a piece that I love bringing into spaces. I love this space, so thank you all for being here today. It's participatory, but not like a sing-along kind of way. But I think you'll get it. But just to kind of get a feel for it, if you would indulge me just in a collective breath together before I begin, and then I promise there's no bouncing balls. All right. So take a deep breath in. Take a deep breath out. And can you hear me in the back? All right, sweet. I am notoriously a mumbler, so I'm gonna like yell this. All right. So this piece is called Beginnings. I was 18 when I saw my first dead body. One might say corpse or cadaver to be more exact, to be more clinical, removed. The live sensation, though, was that I was watching a fellow human being enter my line of vision on the other side of a large glass window pane. Two medical assistants were wheeling the man into the space, gingerly navigating a corner to cross into a brightly lit examination room on the second floor of a Buddhist university in Hualien, Taiwan. Lights felt impossibly cheery for such a somber ritual, but as a visitor to the space, I knew better than to voice that observation to the other students crowded beside me. The man on the cold metal gurney couldn't have been more than 50 years old. The skin on his face stretched taut over high cheekbones, his expression serene. The edges of his mouth were turned up in a wan smile, the stubble on his chin flecked with small patches of gray. With his head of salt and pepper hair, he looked distinguished, noble even. As the medical assistants transferred the man's body onto a waiting steel table, I found it difficult to wrap my mind around the fact that he was no longer of this earth. As in, it was incomprehensible to me that the thin pane of glass between us was all that separated the air I was breathing and the air he was not. If his physical being was still intact, I mused, surely his mind was too, somewhere, somehow. I'd never thought much about the separation of mind and body before, about how or whether one could exist without the other. But here I was, and there he was, two bodies colliding briefly on this earthly plane, suspended in various stages of liminality. He caught between this life and the next, me being pulled swiftly into the unpredictable currents of adulthood. The man's long, thin frame resembled my father's. It was a startling association, of momentarily seeing not a stranger, my own father lying there on the smooth steel table. The man's arms looked like they were carved out of flesh-colored marble, robust and angular and almost translucent in places, revealing sinewy veins just beneath the surface of his skin. His hands were upturned on the table, as though he were both giving and receiving some sort of unseen energy in that sterile white room. A sky blue sheet covered the rest of his body, draping him from just below his shoulders all the way down to his feet, which were tucked into white medical booties. If it weren't for the fact that my classmates and I had been summoned to observe the preparation of this man's body, he could have well been alive, but asleep. father often napped with that same expression on his face, eyes loosely shut, lips slightly parted, face relaxed. My father was a man of few words, someone I'd spent my 18 years trying to understand, and seeing his lifeless doppelganger in the next room over caused me to gasp involuntarily. One of my classmates glanced over and gave me a sympathetic nod before turning toward the glass window. I studied my breath. The man's silence echoed loudly throughout the high-ceiling examination room. I felt an odd kinship with this stranger, the family he may have left behind. His uncanny likeness to my father told me that our paths hadn't crossed by accident, but there was a reason why I was watching this nameless stranger being tenderly prepared for the next life. 3 medical assistants were now bustling about in the examination room, retrieving metal instruments and glass containers and gauze from steel shelves at the far end of the space. I couldn't hear anything that was happening in there. The glass muffled the sounds of their footsteps and the gentle clinking of their instruments, but I imagined that the assistants were humming, murmuring to themselves contentedly. To them, this was clearly a happy ceremony, a quiet celebration of life. From our side of the glass, my teacher explained to us that the man on the steel table was one of hundreds of people who had pledged their bodies to Tzu University that year for use in the medical school's anatomy classes. Many of the now deceased had been terminally ill when they made the decision to donate their bodies to science. And in that sense, she said, they were all what were known as silent mentors. Their bodies would be preserved and kept in the second-floor morgue until they were needed, at which point they would be removed from their lockers and prepared for various uses: simulation surgeries, dissection, clinical observation. The teacher's words cast a softer light on the situation, gently shifting the atmosphere to one of reverence, not fear. It was not an accident that the university had chosen to house its mentors above ground, she said. The Buddhists believe in honoring the dead, and that meant giving them a proper place amongst the living, not tucked away underground or out of sight. They are teaching us how to live, even after they are no longer alive, my teacher said in Mandarin, staring not at our stunned expressions, but over our heads and through the glass at the lifeless man on the table. She smiled serenely. And that's the thing about death if you think about it this way. It doesn't mean anything is ever finished. We're just contributing to life's conversation from a different angle. 生活才刚开始, she said. Their lives have just begun. A Buddhist university was an unlikely place for me to find myself that summer after my freshman year, for I was neither a devout Buddhist nor a particularly avid fan of mosquitoes or cockroaches, of which the university grounds had plenty. I was also not a medical student then, nor have I been since. But the forces that brought me to Taiwan were manifold. It was a chance to spend a summer away from the stifling confines of Southern California, where I found it increasingly difficult to exist under the watchful eyes of my immigrant parents. It was an opportunity to shake off my restlessness after that first year of college, which I had spent living on my own, but still just half an hour away from my mother's home cooking. It was also a chance to recoup from a breast cancer scare and surgery that had recalibrated my understanding of life's innate precarity. Most importantly, though, the solo sojourn was my attempt to immerse myself in Mandarin and to reconnect with my Taiwanese roots, 2 tasks I had put off for years, which now felt impossibly urgent. Time suddenly felt precious, impossible even, like trying to carry water in a sieve. Growing up in the States meant that my understanding of my own culture was cursory at best, poorly cobbled together pseudo-history at worst. My brother and I had attended Chinese school every Saturday for about 10 years, but our vocabulary was still the equivalent of that of 2nd or 3rd graders. My parents and their friends chuckled at our ABC, American-born Chinese accents, our westernized mouths unable to form the nuanced inflections of our mother tongue. I joined and led culture clubs in high school and in that first year of college, but I sensed there was something I was still missing beyond the social ceremony of boisterous potlucks and pageantry of folk dance performances, colorful silk fans and ribbons, rattle drums and golden rings, shimmering and shaking to the beat of unfamiliar memories. How, in just 2 generations, had I become so estranged from our family's cultural roots? My parents had tried to find little ways to keep us tethered to our heritage, but I had resisted their efforts for so long, and now the burden of cultural reconciliation felt like it was mine alone to bear. I was trying to make amends with my ancestors before it was too late. The recent threat of mortality had upped the urgency of this rekindling. Making the solo trip to Taiwan was my way of igniting the fire, trying to wrangle the flames of collective history with my own 2 hands. Hualien was in a part of Taiwan that I hadn't yet explored. Prior trips back with family had largely centered around Taipei, that metropolitan hub of shopping, skyscrapers, and bustling night markets. Set about halfway down the east coast of the island, Hualien was more rural than any place I'd ever lived in the States, more country than I'd ever understood Taiwan to be. On the train ride down along the coastline at the start of that summer, my eyes strained to distinguish between the grassy expanses of rice paddies and the dense, shaggy rows of tea leaves rustling in the wind. The air was consistently thick with the promise of warm rainfall, and the sun was unfettered by tall buildings or trees, rendering umbrellas necessary by mid-morning, a small attempt to ward off its harsh rays. In the sweltering heat, against a backdrop of winding dirt roads and open fields and endless blue skies, I began to breathe more deeply, to take more in, to let the slowness of the town slick my skin. Up until that point, I had viewed my life as a current, constantly surging forward in one direction toward an unknowable future, smoothing over stones and obstacles that tried to impede its flow. I didn't yet understand that those stones were not obstacles, but the very markers of my life, that the water washing over them was not life itself, but time. At 18, I had been fortunate enough to live a relatively sheltered life, one in which my main concerns centered grade point averages and my acceptance from one institution into the next. Getting ahead, this forward momentum was the goal. Time felt precious because I'd always been told it was limited, fast disappearing. But in Hualien, the unhurried pace of the countryside soothed me, reminded me of how impossibly frenetic I allowed my mind to get, and how the stresses of day-to-day living had impacted my ability to just be. Walking from the dorm rooms to the main university building each morning made my skin sticky to the touch, my body more permeable to the thickness of the air that held me. Time felt abundant, full, like the humidity held secrets that I needed to hear. So I allowed myself to listen. There was a difference to experiencing life in this way. In Hualien, every day became a tributary that eddied around itself, circling. The second week of classes, I stayed out all night at a pub with my classmates, joking and talking to locals who were amused by our American accents. Despite our clear markers of foreignness, the regulars welcomed us in. The older couple who owned the place stir-frying garlicky leafy greens and tofu for us well past midnight. I practiced my Mandarin and eased into the tender familiarity with the tones forming in my throat, muscle memory compensating for my relative lack of vocabulary. I hadn't expected to assuage some of my intergenerational guilt in the dim lighting of a local watering hole, but the warmth with which we were received made me feel a little less foreign in the motherland. That summer, I really began to process and think about the trajectory of my life as a whole, what I'd been doing for those first 18 years of living, and how I would spend the next 18 and beyond. In my quest to construct an identity living in a country I did not yet call my own, it was also the first time I really began to see the threads of continuity that bound me to my parents, their past to our present, to my future. My father had grown up on the east coast of the island, a little farther north of Hualien in Luodong, and I'd heard stories about how he'd bike with his two brothers throughout the countryside, running into trouble or finding it, eventually seeking routes for escape and distance between himself and his hometown. At 18, my father would have been conscripted into Taiwan's mandatory military service, forced to abandon his childhood, and here I was, returning to the site of departure decades later. These dual reminders of mortality, a silent mentor, and my own breast cancer scare, had forced me to confront the realities of aging and endings, this loss of innocence and an irreversible threshold. A few months prior, I had undergone surgery for a mass they found in my left breast, a small, hard lump no larger than a glass marble. As someone who had cruised through childhood with nary a broken bone, the prospect of facing an illness as abstract as cancer at such a relatively young age felt unjust, unfair. Hadn't I followed all the rules, abided by my parents' fearful admonishments to be a good girl, to avoid risky behaviors? Why was I being punished anyway? Not that fairness mattered when it comes to matters of the flesh. Still, I felt indignant about the reality of my own mortality. Youth had afforded me an illusion of invincibility, but a series of tests and needles and scalpels humbled me into understanding. The last thing I saw before the anesthesia kicked in, as I was lying on that stiff, uncomfortable gurney being wheeled into surgery, fluorescent lights passing overhead like road markings lit by headlights, was something that haunted me all summer. My parents' eyes, filled with unspoken worry. My father had called the operation small potatoes in the weeks leading up to my surgery. My mother had fretted over the schoolwork I might miss. Neither knew how to prepare me for the existential angst that would come to eclipse my days. I remember my last thought too, floating into my mind's eye just as the darkness crept in. Don't be afraid. That summer was also the first time I really began to meditate. Prior to my months-long stay at Tsinghua University, I had attempted to get into a practice of sitting each morning for 10 minutes at a time, a way to calm my mind before the hubbub of the day. Back then, meditating still felt performative, like I was trying to commune with a side of myself I didn't yet have access to, hidden behind the raucous static of a busy lifestyle governed by emails and deadlines. But out in Hualien's sleepy countryside, with fewer day-to-day concerns occupying my mind, I found that I was compelled toward the cushion. Maybe it was boredom, maybe it was curiosity, sitting still as a way to challenge myself. Whatever the reason, each day I rose with the sun, trying to beat the low hum of early morning mosquitoes and the sheen of sweat that glossed my forehead by mid-morning, to sit atop a stone picnic table shaded by a gazebo, cross-legged and still. After planting myself in the coolest spot on the table, I would begin. Relax the hands into the lap. Drop the shoulders away from the ears. Sigh. Swallow twice, once to clear the throat, and then again to welcome in the breath. Close the eyes, but only gently, so that the eyelids are still permeable to the world. There, before the activities of the day began, I cleared my head and allowed my mind to drift. I learned how to find the connection between my mind and body, and then I learned how to dissolve those ties at whim, my hands disappearing as I cradled them in my lap. I learned about the importance of following my breath and of the hard-earned focus and balance and awareness that came from training my mind to be awake to the present moment, to exist independently of the pressures of time. On the inhale, I felt all of my senses. On the exhale, I let go of my attachments. Inhale, exhale. The cyclical nature of the practice meant that it was difficult to determine where one breath ended and the next one began. Following my breath was also a lesson in control, as in I needed to loosen my grip on it. It was a lesson in trust, as in to trust the lungs to know what to do next. Survival was not just a corporeal endeavor, but a mental one, not one without the other. I deepened my breathing, listening to the rhythm of my body's movements in place. In sitting stillness, I realized that my real reason for being in Taiwan was to actively seek the source of my mother wound, which had been forming just beneath the surface of my skin and was now beginning to bloom in a way I could no longer ignore. My parents had moved across an ocean decades ago to offer my brother and me a chance at better opportunities, a new beginning. But the remnants of their own traumas were so deeply embedded in my body that I needed to physically return to the root in order to fully understand myself. I had to get out of my headspace and descend lower into the heart space in order to hear what it was my parents and my ancestors were trying to say to me. When I meditated, I returned to my body, to my breath, and with this, I regained awareness of my place within this complicated matrix of space and time. It was a form of triangulation that helped guide my thinking, my longing, my being. That summer, as I settled into a somatic rhythm in step with my ancestors, I realized that I couldn't tell where my parents' story ended and where my own finally began, whether it was finally beginning at all, or why it even mattered to distinguish between the two. Perhaps this was besides the point. Our stories instead a jumble of cause and effect, moving in every direction all at once. All of our stories beginning and ending, all of us living and dying, changing from moment to moment. sitting still atop the stone picnic table each morning as the sun warmed the air. That particular Taiwanese mugginess clinging to my skin was comforting beyond words. Even just a few short months ago, waking up in the cold chill of AC in a hospital bed in LA, this kind of peace would have felt impossible. And yet, I had arrived, somehow. With each breath, I sank deeper into the pull of the present. I gave myself over to the novel embrace of summertime tranquility, of unknowingness. This was what made life both possible and precious. The continuity of it, the finality of it, two truths I tried to hold simultaneously in the curvature of my upturned palms.
Oh yeah, give it up one more time for all the readers, everybody. Yeah, keep it going, keep it going. Hell yeah. Each unpoetry is very different. So if you like this one, you might like another one. They're all kind of strange and weird, and the weirdness of this one was that it's all words. Sometimes it's not all words. I have a newsletter sign up over at the table if you want to know more about that. There's some flyers for any upcoming unpoetry shows we got going. And yeah, thanks for being here. I know time is precious and there's 1,000 fucking things to do in Seattle at any given moment. And that's even just like taking apart from time, y'all, that we all need to take time for ourselves sometimes. So I really do appreciate you taking the time to be here. I maybe get another drink. I don't know. I don't really know what's happening. Hang out. Enjoy yourselves. Thanks for being here. Peace out. Been experimenting with this fucking camera. Everything I shoot in color is too dull. So I've tried the very vibrant color section, but it just makes everything fucking orange. Which is an annoying problem.
Is there a way to
I don't even know if there's a button for that.
blow up the problem? Like just orange vision.
Powered IS? What is powered IS? That does nothing. Huh, I don't know. It's not really that many buttons. White balance. The white balance button isn't working. Maybe it's like a filter. It made everything kind of snappy too.
Good job.
Camera's
I'm
so
Ian, by the way. I don't know if we met.
Whitney.
Hi,
dull.
Whitney.
Nice to meet you.
Likewise.
Yeah, I've been trying to film in color so I can get out of my own hole of high contrasted bullshit. But now the camera, I don't know how to work it.
So, I mean, this won't matter very much, but auto white balance, I mean, this will actually, it probably won't matter very much at all. But your location,
Yeah.
the white balance will still be the same, so you might have to like alter it in post, but again, it doesn't really matter. Or you can just set it for, just do it
The
anytime
new
you like
location?
change, yeah.
Yeah, and that'll kind of make it uniform as I move through locations if I
Yeah.
remember to hit the button?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
That's why, I mean, I fucked up at that Fry reading where everything was very orange because we changed where we were, but I didn't change the white balance.
That's what you mean. You told me that, but I was like, that doesn't move.
Yeah.
Thanks for the knowledge. I appreciate your candor.
Well, see, now-
but now I don't know what the fuck
Well, now
that
you
means.
can integrate that knowledge
Yes.
and how
See,
I fucked up.
this is what I mean.
And you can usually, I mean, when it's really orange, you know,
Yeah.
you just add a little more.
And it balances it out?
There's like magenta, green, and then orange, blue. And you just kind of fuck it.
Huh.
You can typically get it closer to that.
Yeah. The way it usually works, and I guess it's like a great way to learn, is like, because it happened with the editing software, is I tend to